Nice, how have you been, mate?
Yeah, very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, mate, not bad. So, before we get stuck into your rugby story, mate, where was home for you and who lived at home with you?
So I was born in Bridgend, which is a town just in between Cardiff and Swansea, um, where the Celtic Crusaders were formed after a while. And it was just me, my twin brother, and my mum Jane.
So, where did that competitive edge come from? Did you and Ben always have it?
I think we had it when we were babies. So I think when you're
Not
twins
the
and
way.
yeah, when probably in the womb. But I think when you're twins and there's only 6 minutes between you, there's no reason for your brother to be better than you at anything, because it's such a small difference in age. So it was competitive as soon as we could probably walk, really, and whether that was sport or whether it was just trying to get one up on each other. So we've always been the same.
And how was you introduced to rugby and where was it you were first taught?
So I was introduced to rugby union because I was initially a football player. Ben was the rugby player. And I went to go and watch Ben's rugby union game because my football game got cancelled because of the weather. And one of their players got injured at the beginning of the game and they were short of players. So they just asked me to jump on because I was still in my boots from football and kind of loved it from there really ever since.
And where was that, mate, club-wise?
So that was at Pencoed RFC. So that was when we were probably about 9 or 10, if that. So and then kind of upset Ben a little bit because rugby was his thing and football was my thing.
So, growing up with football, mate, who was the team that you followed?
So it was Cardiff City. So I had trials at Swansea and Cardiff.
Okay.
Because like I say, I was predominantly more football. But then it got to the point where I'd had a couple of trials, hadn't worked out, and then at age 11, I kind of wanted to decide whether I was doing rugby or football, and which one I was going to take more seriously. And at that point, I felt like I was better at rugby than I was football, which is why me and my brother both went the rugby route then from about 11, 12 onwards.
Do you remember much about playing football early? Was it quick in out like that, or was it pretty easy to fit in?
No, it was fine because it like my mum was the coach of like the amateur football team that we played for, so it was very family orientated. Kids that all went to the same junior school and stuff like that. So that was fine. I think when I went into football and I had trials at Cardiff and Swansea, you realise just how big football was, and how good you had to be to even to be signed on clubs at that point were probably in like Championship and League One. So it was just one of them things where I felt like my physical attributes of being quite quick, quite strong, suited rugby more when I started playing it compared to football, where as you can see now, it's a lot more technical. The physicality has kind of gone out of it maybe in the last 10, 15 years. So it was definitely the right move for me at the time.
Even like wise decision for a young man, that mate, isn't it? Well, not even a man, a young lad, really, aren't you? At 10, 11.
Yeah, I've always been a bit of a thinker in a sense of like what I want to do and whether if I'm going to do something, I want to do it to the best of my ability and give it my full shot. And if I'm not 100% committed to it, which at that point I was kind of getting to that point with football because I had a couple of trials but hadn't worked out. I was like, right, it's time to go on to something else and not really dwell on it and try something different.
Right. So how did the games contrast for you? So you've gone from playing football to rugby union, which is quite an intricate sport in some aspects, isn't it?
Yeah, it took me time to just get used to the rules. And I think when you're a kid, you just want to get out and about and just run around with your mates. So at that point, it was literally just give me the ball and I'll run with it kind of attitude because all the
Yeah.
like the moves and the technical side of it coming as you get older. So it was just about having fun and enjoying it. And I think when we probably got to the age of about 12 when we went to high school where it became a little bit more serious was when you
Yeah.
start thinking, actually, do you know what? This might be something I can carry on and till I'm 18 and see where I go with it kind of thing.
Fair enough, mate. So how you just touched on high school then, mate. So how was the transition into high school and was school something you enjoyed, Reese?
I think you enjoy like obviously seeing your mates every day. I don't think everyone enjoyed being in lessons, did they? To be honest, at
No,
that
not
age.
really.
But yeah, the school we went to, which was called Bridgend Comprehensive, was had a very rich history in producing rugby union players that had either played for Bridgend or played for Wales. So it was sport was a big part of like the curriculum. So when we got into that and kind of joined the rugby team where it was a mixture of all the junior schools that we played against joining together. That's when it went on to that next level then, as well as obviously starting to get your education on board and thinking like what topics are you probably stronger at going up to year nines, where you have to make a choice of what you really want to do, really going into your later years of high school.
So your junior schools, would that have been rugby union as well, Reese? So like up here, now it's predominantly rugby league, isn't it? Other than the Sale catchment area and maybe Newcastle Falcons and that. So what was the standard of school rugby like compared to club rugby like?
They were both pretty strong because rugby union is quite it's the main sport in South Wales. So every kid grows up wanting to do that. So the club sides as well as the school sides, even before going into high school, were quite competitive because it's what everyone wanted to do. I think when we got to age 12, because there was about 5 or 6 junior schools in our catchment area that all went to the same high school, you were then getting the lads who were standing out at the junior school level playing in the first team in a sense of high school, where the level just went up. It always does when you get older, as you'll know. So it was mainly that, and then at the end of the first year was then when rugby league kind of came onto the scene, and that's when I kind of first got interested with it.
All right, mate. So positional wise in rugby union, where was you playing growing up?
So I was outside centre, but I used to play a little bit of flanker as well. So I used to chop and change depending on what team I was playing for, whether that was club team, whether that was school team, or the district, which is what you call the service area up here, the equivalent of that. So depending on where the coach wanted me, I could play in a couple of positions.
How did you find that? Because back row and 13's outside centre for viewers or listeners that don't quite get it, are very different, aren't they?
Yeah, they were very different. I think probably the only reason I played a little bit of flanker that time was because I was an early developer. So I was quite big and stronger than most kids my age. So when it came to like tackling and ripping the ball off people, it was one of my strengths. But I also had the strength of being quite quick, which is why I played 13. So it kind of really depended on who we were playing, whether they had a player who was the opposite flanker or the opposite 13. I'd probably match up against them, and kind of depending on who we were up against.
Right. And defensively must have been a bit of an eye opener initially, because in the back row, so where you're talking about playing flanker, you defend around a lot of bodies, don't you? At 13, mate, you can, not that you did, but you can be made to look silly, can't you?
Yeah, they can. Like, I think that's one of the things is, at a young age. It's just about just trying things, and learning what skill sets you can have, because there's never a bad thing of having too many. As a flanker, I was doing a lot of tackling. I was getting over the ball, kind of trying to slow their ruck down. But then at centre, it was all about making decisions quickly. And on the defensive kind of side, where there's more space there, and you've got to kind of use your agility to against your opposite number. So I was never scared of trying different things, because it was just like another string to your bow. Then as you were getting older, which you knew you had in your locker in one sense.
So, regarding your sporting like vision, mate, do you reckon you probably had a bit of an old head on young shoulders type saying?
Yeah, I would say so. I think I was very good at kind of just being very focused on one thing. So I think, especially later down the line when we moved up to Warrington, I was so tunnel vision in a sense of I'm going to do this. It was more about, I didn't see moving up here to join a new school or anything like that. It was, I'm moving up here to play for Warrington. That was kind of my focus, and anything outside of that periphery probably took a little bit of a backseat, like school and grades, which I probably could have got better than what I had anyway, because I was very focused on, I wanted to make the move worth it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, mate. Is that if, like you said, it's a lot of kids in your position, all they want to do is pick a rugby ball up, and if you can make a bit of a career out of it, bonus, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. So you mentioned district stuff there, mate. So like for people up here, it's like you said, service area. So what do you remember about the whole selection process of that, and who sent you to school or the club?
So that would be related to the school. So what would happen is you play for your school teams, and then depending on what school you went to or where you lived, there'd be like a trial where you'd go and have a look at. And then you'd go and play in that trial game, and then you'd get picked for the district squad, which was basically Bridgend. And then you'd go and play like Cardiff, Swansea, other parts or other regions. of South Wales, and play like their best of that region, if that made sense. They're like service up here, where at 14 and 15, maybe even a bit younger, you're playing like Warrington against Widnes, St Helens, Wigan, kind of that kind of similarity, really. So at that age, you compete against everyone else in the South Wales area to see, right, am I at that level? Am I good enough in the sense at this level? Because I think at every point when you're a kid, the next level is always a bit nervous. Am I good enough to be at this level? Can I make it? Am I going to be one that stands out, or am I going to be one of the crowd? So you're always wanting to test yourself and go to that next level and see how far you can go.
And was you someone that needed an early touch, Rhys, or could you bide your time and like go with the flow of the game?
I'd always go looking for it. I was always one of them when it came to warm ups. I never liked warming up because I always felt like the warm up would be an indicator of how I was feeling, whether I felt sluggish or whether, or the other way around, whether I felt really great. But I think as soon as I got my first touch and probably beat someone, it would be right. Okay, I'm on it now, and kind of like in the one sense, I wouldn't think about things. Especially, I think that's one of the things that as a kid, until then you start playing as you're older, you're just natural as a kid. You just go out and do it. You don't even think about it. Whereas I think as you get older and it becomes your job, or you're worrying about injuries or whatever, you then start overthinking things when then actually it kind of gets in your way. I think we're all the best version of ourselves when it comes to sport when we're younger because we just do it for fun.
Instead of worrying about structures and things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you just go and enjoy it and play in the moment, kind of thing.
And so I know you just touched on it there, mate, but would you be nervous initially each level you went up at? Would lads know who you was because of how good you was as a kid?
Yeah, not trying to be cocky, but I think once you started playing in the club sides and the school sides, you'd have whispers of players in certain regions who you knew were pretty good players. So it'd always be like, if you're playing against a team where someone plays for that team or that district, right, okay, it's going to be a decent game this because he plays for them and I'm going to have to get the better of him or vice versa. So I enjoyed them games, but they probably came out more just before I left Wales. And then when we moved up here, where, like, probably from the age of about 13 onwards, you start realizing who's very good at that age, and going, right, okay, I'm playing against such and such state, it's going to be a decent one, kind of thing.
Or was there any sniffing like a youth international set up before you come up here, mate?
Yeah, so at age 13, they used to do a West Wales, East Wales kind of thing. So instead of being a full international, it was, I think it was anyone from Bridgend onwards, which was West Wales. You'd have trials and you get picked for that, as well as East Wales, and they'd have two teams. So it'd be like an A and a B team, and either way you'd get a cap basically because it was the best players at that age within each region, and they played a game against each other at Llanelli Scarlets' old ground. But yeah, I think that was age 13.
Now, how was you in the whole get go with that logistically? How did he look after you? Do you turn up and do you get to keep any like little memorabilia and that, mate?
I think I got a Welsh cap somewhere. I think it's somewhere in the loft somewhere, to be honest. But yeah, we just had a trial and then we had a few sessions. And then it was kind of like just an early indicator, I think, at that age where you're like, okay, I'm in and around that kind of level. Because that was the highest level you could get to. And I think as you got older and me and Ben moved up here at 14, they probably went on to then having Wales caps at 16, 17, 18, where you'd play full internationals. But we never got to that stage because we moved up here. But at that age, it was probably the highest level you could get to regarding like rugby and at that age.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's some feat, mate, because every football's got a bit more popular in Wales as well now, hasn't it? But fundamentally, the egg is tends to be the shape ball that gets picked up as a kid, isn't it? And dad's granddad's great granddad tends to be a very like family orientated club game. It's just bred in. So to hit that level at that age must have been mega impressive. But something you look around and thought because you were very older, young shoulders, like I can mix it at this level.
Yeah, it was just an indicator for me because I knew at that age everyone was at different developments. So me and my brother, and there was a few other lads as well in both setups, whether it be East Wales or West Wales, who were more physically developed at that age. So you've always got a bit of an advantage. And I think part of me always knew that people catch up. And then once you get to like say 15, 16, which is when we moved up north to Warrington, that's when it kind of like, right, okay, what's that little bit that makes you different? Because physically now everyone's kind of getting to that point where they're very similar. Like you kind of getting to that point where you're all young men rather than still being kids. And it's like, right, what's that extra little bit, whether it be physical or whether it be mental, that's going to make you kick on? Because as yourself, you'll probably know there's a lot of players who get to say 15, 16, 17, and that's when distractions come in. You start socializing, you start going out a bit more. Your life predominantly revolves around your friends, your circle of friends. So there's a lot more things to kind of maybe take you off the path if you want to. So it's at that age is when it kind of like, it's probably the most prominent age where it's like, do you really want to do this? When you're at 13, 14, it's a bit more like you're just having fun. You're just enjoying it, seeing what level you can get to, but it's still quite a far way off when you have to make that choice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you can still get the bounce back ability of having a kick about with your mates and still being able to have it in you to play a game, isn't it?
Yeah,
Where I know you don't want to say it, but at like 15, 16, 17, it's drinking, it's partners, it's holidays, it's little sacrifices that people don't understand, like not picking out at Christmas,
yeah,
not going to birthday parties and stuff. Use that to make that sacrifice really young. So yeah, it is. It's you. You literally just go that way or that way. There is none of there's no middle ground there, mate. Is there? You can't get away with cutting corners because you get found out, like you said.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did rugby league come into your life then, mate? And how did that happen?
So the school we went to in Tig was predominantly rugby union, but it was an ex pupil who actually played for Warrington. His name was Kevin Ellis. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. So he was back living in the local area, and somehow the school had organised for us to be entered into what's called the Champion School. So it's a rugby league schools tournament that's around the UK, and the curtain raiser at that time, I know it's changed now, is the final. Sorry, is the curtain raiser to the Challenge Cup final. So we got entered into that. Kev came in to actually coach us because at this point we didn't really know the difference between league and union. And I'll be honest, I'd never even heard of rugby league at this point. For me, it was just the same thing. It's just the only difference was it wasn't a ruck; it was just to play the ball, and you had to be 10 yards back. That was literally it.
Yeah.
And we just kind of got through the rounds and kind of kicked on and got to a point where we were like, right, we're in a semi-final. Didn't expect anything of it, kind of thing. Played a semi-final, which actually was a school from Widnes, so Wade Deacon, in the semi-final, and we won. And all of a sudden, we're in a final of a rugby league tournament that we didn't even know the sport existed till 6 months before, kind of thing. So it kind of really took off quite quickly, and then played in that final, won that final quite convincingly, which was the curtain raiser to Hull FC versus Leeds at the Millennium Stadium. And then kind of won that, and kind of then went on the summer holidays then, and kind of just enjoyed the moment. Didn't really think anything of it really, and then it all kind of kicked on from there.
Right. So when you start playing, and you've just mentioned like the few of the basics, like the shuttle running, for instance, for a rugby union, like they may struggle with it because everything's up close and personal, isn't it? If it's your pick and go, or well, a scoot in rugby league terms, or if it's your little ruck plays, so you play the ball plays, tends to be pretty snug. So when you've got to go back, all right, would you have played with two markers at that age, Rhys, or one?
Yeah, we would have played with two markers, so that was one of the
Yeah, the two
reasons why
markers.
Kev came in, because he gave us a little bit of a basics kind of knowledge of, right, okay, these are the basic rules that you need to understand kind of at this age. And it was kind of like we were playing rugby union, but rugby league, because it was all one out rugby. There was no moves or anything. And we just had,
Even better if he has no set piece there, is there?
exactly, yes. We had about 5 or 6 lads who were a bit physically more developed at our age, about 12 years of age. And it was just one out carries where we just kind of just play rugby union. When I first came up here, do you know, like when you have a lead and a guy at the back, never knew what that was. So my
Yeah,
first session of rugby league, someone told me to do that, and I was like, "What's that?" And they
Yeah,
couldn't believe that we didn't know that, and we'd been
yeah.
scouted by Warrington because it was literally we were playing rugby union, but the only difference was we were just playing the ball rather than it being a ruck.
That's it. No, so it's like, how did you find having time on the ball? Because sometimes in the positions you were playing in rugby union, you don't get the chance to have a look up, do you? Like, I imagine, especially at 13, they're probably in your face quite as like rugby league call it a Z defender, don't they? Or well, we used to call it a Z defender. So coming from the outside, then they'll probably line speed you in at 13, don't they? So what was
Yeah.
it like looking and having a bit of time on the ball and that as a kid?
Oh, I loved it because it suited me even
Yeah,
more because I had more space. Because I was quick at that age, I just run round teams kind of thing. Like, because at that point, like you used to give it to the biggest lad who'd run straight or the quickest lad who'd just run around them and go like that, wouldn't it? So
yeah,
it was literally like that. So the more space for me suited me, and I think I wasn't, even though I played flanker a bit, I wasn't a massive fan of the rucks because it would always be messy. You get kicked in the face, stamped on, or whatever it might be.
yeah.
Because you could get away with a lot more back then than you can now.
Right.
So it took all that out of it. So it was just more space to run with, and you could whack people as well. Like you could proper hit people.
Oh, the
Um,
shoulder charge was in when we were younger, mate, wasn't it?
exactly, yeah. So it was just in one sense, it was that and it being quicker. So I actually enjoyed it more. But at the time, I didn't really realize how much I enjoyed it more until I went then back and started playing rugby union again. Because when you're playing, we used to play rugby league basically that summer. We didn't play rugby union in that summer. So then when we went back and played rugby union, you could tell the difference. So you could only really compare when you were going from one to the other.
Right. So how did Warrington come calling and like how was it for two young lads and did your mum go with you? How was the move and did they help you out with it?
So they actually scouted us initially from that game. So that game there was two scouts, which was one was a guy called Peter Farrell, who's actually Andy Farrell's dad, and another guy called Brian Chambers, who I've still keep in contact with. They came to watch us at that game, and then about a year later, we were playing for Wales then rugby league, and it was like a tournament thing up in Sheffield where you play like the Northwest, Yorkshire, London South, Cumbria teams, and it'd be like a bit of a mini round robin tournament. And we got told they were coming to watch that. Peter came to watch. I actually got injured in the first game, but I scored 2 tries. And I was at this point, I thought, right, I'm not going to get picked now because I've got injured and start panicking and stuff like that. But he'd seen enough. And then we got invited up then for a kind of like a week to kind of see what the club was about, go and watch a game, and kind of get really a bit more of an introduction of what professional rugby league was like, and the scholarship programs and all that. Because at that point, we hadn't really seen what was behind the curtain, in a sense. I think once you go and yeah, once you go behind the curtain and see what professional team like, whether it be rugby, football, whatever it might be, you get maybe more of an idea of how big it is. So up until that point, you're just having fun, like I say. So, and that's when it kind of went on from there. Then did a week's kind of training up there with the scholarship teams and kind of just saw what that was about. Luckily, Burtonwood, which was the only club side at the time that was in like the top division, because that was another thing that was different up here, is you had divisions at 13, 14, whereas down here, you just played friendlies basically every week in Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah. So luckily that we were allowed to play in that game, even though I think we shouldn't have, because you do like the cards and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Do you remember that, do you?
Yeah, I can remember standing there and just thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Play rugby. So me and Ben actually played half a game for each team. So it was Burtonwood versus St. Pat's. We played a half for each team to make it kind of fair, really. And that was like the first game where we played where it was up here where they got a proper look at us. But it was quite funny because we played a team from Wigan. I think it's called St. Peter's school.
Yeah, the school.
We played them 2 weeks before from my school in Wales because we were still living in Wales at the time. And there was one of the lads who played for St. Pat's played for them. So he recognised me because at this point I had long blonde hair. See, that's long gone now. And he was like, I recognise you. And then he actually started giving me the ball because he recognised me from the game 2 weeks before. So small world, isn't it?
No, it is, mate. Yeah, it is. No, so do you know when you've gone back then? Sorry to go back a little bit, mate, and you've gone back playing rugby union, haven't you? How does the Wales Rugby League thing happen?
So we played for Bridgend in that competition, and then because we were the first, I think we were the first Welsh school boys team to win that competition, that champion school. So it was kind of like a bit of local news, really. So at that point, I think Wales Rugby League kind of got in touch, had a bit of a trial on, and tried to kind of promote rugby league off the back of it.
Yeah,
So then we ended up basically playing rugby union and rugby league at the same time, and then kind of got picked in the Wales squad for that at 13 rugby league, and then played in that round robin tournament, and it kind of all spiraled from that final, really. It all happened quite quickly because it was at the time it was like no Welsh squad had even been in the final, I think, let alone won it, because rugby league was predominantly a northern sport, hadn't really at this point really gone into the Welsh schools because the rugby union was so strong. And yeah, that kind of was the springboard for it.
I think. How did you, as a kid? I know we've spoke about we're playing for fun, and we still love it up until the structures and the league systems come in, which you hadn't witnessed till you come up here, really, had you, mate? But was the transition between the two courts still pretty easy for you?
At that age, it was, yeah, because it
Yeah,
was, you don't really know the ins and outs. You're not reviewing games. It's very similar. The only difference, like I say, was there was no rucks and you had 10 meters more space. And for us, it was still a game of rugby. It wasn't like we were going, oh, we've got a rugby league game today. It was like, oh, we've got a rugby game today, whether it was union or whether it was league. Because at that point, kind of like the core of my club side as well as the school side was just about playing rugby. We played rugby at that age. We played football. We played cricket. Like anything to get us outdoors, really. At that point, there was probably had a Game Boy and a PlayStation. That was it. Not all the other
and no,
techie
it
stuff
was
now,
on
is
it.
it? You know, the old like Game Boy with like the Pikachu game and whatever it might be.
Yeah, Game Boy Color with that little magnifying thing over it and
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah,
Showing how
so
they we need to
yeah,
stop it.
exactly. Yeah.
Bet
So
your mum's washer was on the go all the time, wasn't it?
what's
You're
that?
never
Sorry.
in, really, are you? Your
No,
mum's washer was probably spinning all the time, mate.
yeah, like we didn't wear white as kids because it just get dirty, wouldn't it? Like anything white
Yeah.
trainers, white t-shirt, whatever it might be. So constantly outside. So until that, it was just about having fun.
So when you come up for the week, mate, what's the chat like going home?
Um, I think me
Was
and Ben
decision
both.
made?
Say that again, sorry.
I need to interrupt you. Was your decision made? Do you think, Reese? Was you pretty determined to be heading back up here?
Um, I was, yeah, but like we were only 14 at the time, me and I think we just turned 14. So there was a lot more factors that come into it because my mum had a partner at the time. We had the week up there, and at the end of that week, and especially after that game, we both felt like, right, we can mix it up here, because I think one of the nervous things we had was, especially that week, was we were obviously playing rugby union, but still like we're playing rugby league, but still playing rugby union. Can we mix it with lads who've played rugby league their whole lives? We'd had a bit of a taste of it with the school, but is it different if it's like actually living there and as in a club setup? And after that game, we both felt like we could do it, but there was a lot more things that come into it in a sense of my mum having to move, get a new job, her partner at the time as well. All them things as a kid you just don't know, kind of thing. And as I've got older, I've realised actually what my mum did to get us up there and like kind of respect it even more because as an adult you just have a bit more of an understanding. So I think me and Ben had a bit of a chat, and I was a bit like, yeah, let's go for it. Because the other thing at that age is you saying goodbye to all your friends as well. So you're moving about 200 miles. Your friends that you've known for years, you're not going to see anymore. And they might not understand why you're doing it because it's an opportunity you can't turn down, kind of thing. So I was probably more pro for going. Ben was a little bit more on the fence because he was a bit more sociable than me at that age. I was quite, as I say, tunnel vision. Um, and then my mum was like, right, if you guys want to do it, I'll back it and we'll do it. And she did all the prep and all the moving and all that. And it was obviously a lot to do at that time. And she relocated up here and then we moved up quite shortly afterwards.
So you're having to share the old dial up to go on MSN and keep in touch with your mates. Your
Yeah,
mum couldn't use the phone.
exactly. Yeah, kind of thing. So it was a different world back then in one sense, wasn't it? Like everything's
Was,
changed
mate,
quite a
was.
lot.
Yeah,
So yeah, like I don't even think I had an iPhone at that point. It was just like a normal phone with like Snake 2 or something.
yeah. Look at you against it too.
So I mean, that's how long ago we're talking.
Yeah. So, how was it initially, mate? Like, how long do you think the bedding in process took? Was you still 14 when you got up here then?
Yeah, so we timed it perfectly. In That's a bit of a joke. So in Wales, we were meant to be the last year to do SATs in year nine, but we moved up just before the SATs, and then up in England they were still doing them. So we had to do
Yeah.
SATs with no prep. I remember going into I think it was like a English literature exam, which I had no idea what I was doing, kind of thing. So we couldn't have timed it any worse, really. But from a rugby point of view, it didn't take that long because we'd met a few of the lads who played for Burtonwood, which was the amateur team we joined when we came up for that week because we played for that team. And a few of them went to the school that I went to, which was Great Sankey High School. So we knew a few of that. So the rugby side of it was quite easy to adapt to. It was more the difference in the school in a sense of it was more Great Sankey was more probably not very sporty at that point. It was just starting to get more sporty. I'm wearing a blazer. Like, never worn a blazer in my life. It was in the school there was a one-way walking system, which I just couldn't understand. Like all these little cultural differences just from moving from Wales to England, which kind of takes you a little bit longer to get used to, especially at that age when you're 14 and you can't really understand it because in your head you've moved up there for rugby, not for all the other changes that come with it. So yeah, very different.
How was the club game then, Reese? Or was it at Burtonwood?
Yeah, so it was at Burtonwood. So we joined Burtonwood and we were there for 2 years, 3 years actually. Really enjoyed it. That they were like our friendship group. So there were some lads who went to Sankey, some lads who went to Penkith, and we all trained twice a week and played on the weekends with Burtonwood. And then quite a lot of them lads were in the scholarship program as well at Warrington because they were the only team in the top division at that age in Warrington. So a lot of the players on Warrington's books and their scholarship was from that team. So it was the circle of friends was there straight away. It was more adapting to moving to a new home, going to a different school, them kind of things that took a little bit of time to get used to, like it would anyone really.
And was it being in the cards now, mate? Because you're so cool.
Yeah, so at that point we kind of made a decision because you couldn't really sign at that point. I think you couldn't sign a rugby union's contract until you were 18, and we hadn't actually signed anything with Warrington either. But it was just to be on the scholarship program because that was the difference at that age with rugby league was they had these scholarship programs early, which then hopefully would get you signed at 18. So you were involved a bit, but you weren't technically signed by the club. Whereas in rugby union in Wales, you just got signed at 18. There was no kind of like you're on the pathway and we'll lead you to 18 when you get signed. So that was the reason why we kind of grabbed it with both hands, really. And it was literally just training every week. It was training twice a week with the club side, playing on the weekend, training twice for the scholarship a week because there was no games at that point. It was just training. So it was just rugby constantly.
Yeah. Right. So in domestic rugby union, mate, there was no phase. You were just signed on, not at 18. So was
Yeah,
was you being watched by anyone that you know of before you come up, or
the Ospreys were looking because at that age 13, 14, they'd start looking at players and going, right, that's someone who might kick on in the future. But there was only whispers of it. It was never any formal contact or anything like that. I think we probably left a little bit early for that to happen. I think if we'd left at maybe 16, 17, then there might have been some official conversations if we were still at the level that they wanted us to be at. But I think we were just too young to have them talks really.
you'd like to think that's changed now, mate, wouldn't you? You'd like
Yeah,
to think there's a more phased pathway in.
yeah, I would hope so. Like, obviously, I don't know because obviously I've not spoke to anyone who's younger than me back in Wales. All the friends that I've kept in touch with are my age. But you think with how the games have kicked on now with rugby union that they will have some kind of pathway there. But at the time, I'd say rugby league was probably on a domestic level was probably higher than rugby union, but rugby union's always been high on an international level.
Yeah, yeah.
See the World Cup now, it's a massive thing. Whereas rugby league's more of a domestic competition over here, and obviously in the NRL as well. And then with the World Cup, there's probably 4 or 5 teams that are at the same level. So and that's probably where the games are both at now, really, in a sense. So it was, yeah, we didn't really have any official contact with any rugby union clubs when we moved, because it was kind of like, right, we made the move. That's what we're going to do now.
Fair enough, mate. And then going through school, was there any rep stuff rugby league up here for you before like the academy come along?
So it would be service area. So we did Warrington
Yeah.
service area. I think it was 14 and 15, I think, which was like another trial again. Go to a trial, you get picked for that. And then I think at the end of the year, you'd have 4 or 5 service area games, playing that. And then what would happen then is they'd pick like 20 or 40 players to go into like the Northwest equivalent of what the Wales thing was, where you'd have that round robin in Sheffield again, where you'd pick the 40 best players who've played service area that year. They'd go on a bit of a camp, blue team and red team, 20 against 20 kind of thing, and you'd be unlimited interchanges, and then they'd pick the best 20 lads out of that who would then go play for the Northwest, and then you'd go and play for England then.
Is that everything you done?
Yeah, so we did that. We played. Actually, it's quite funny. So I ended up playing for England under 15s, I think, against Wales under 16s in Bridgend at the home ground where Bridgend used to play. Yeah, so yeah, basically going back into my hometown and playing for the other country, which was a bit obviously different. But it was strange because when we moved up here, we kind of lost touch with Wales Rugby League when we moved up here because we'd relocated to England. And then up here, they had the school system where you did school rugby, club rugby, service area, regions, and then England. You just kind of followed the pathway. So we were just doing what we thought was expected of us, and it resulted in us playing for England because we never had any contact with Wales at the time, where it was like, right, you're going to be playing for Wales in this tournament. We kind of lost communications. So there was a period of time where me and Ben both bounced around from playing for England and then Wales because there wasn't like a clear kind of direction of where we were meant to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you don't know until someone speaks to you, Rhys, do you?
No, and like at that point, it was like 15, 16, you're not going to say to someone, no, I'm not going to do that. You just kind of do as you're told, really, don't you? Especially when you're new to the area and you kind of just want to just get your head down and work hard. So yeah, it resulted in us playing for England against Wales in Wales, which was obviously quite funny now looking back at it.
It was a bit mad. Any of your mates come and watch us and that?
Yeah, a few of them did. Like my uncle and my granddad, who are very strong Welsh accents, came and watched, and they were cheering us on, even though we were playing for England, because they were just proud of us anyway, kind of thing. So, but it's, I think now when it comes to, and I know that Wales have got this now in place where they've got like arrangements with Warrington and Salford, where if lads do relocate, they're still in the Wales setup, and they don't kind of get lost a little bit. I think because me and Ben were maybe one of the first two to do that, we were kind of like a bit of a trial run in a sense. Yeah, so in one sense, what happened with us probably made a little bit of foundations for other lads that then relocated, where they were still kept involved in the Wales setup and they didn't go and play for England, for example.
Yeah. No, I know a lad that's doing it now. He's in Salford Reserves now, Charlie Glover, who's playing for the 18s and that now, mate. So it's nice to see they're still keeping tabs on the kids, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And at what age group did you have to declare nationality, Rhys? Because you get paperwork, don't you, to say who you're eligible for?
Yeah, so I think up until the age of 18, you can basically chop and change each year. And then I think what happens at 18 or whenever you have your full cap at whatever age that is, full international, I think that's when you then kind of declare. But I never played for England first team, and neither did Ben either. I played for England Knights, as we said before we came on air. So I never got a full cap with England, and then I ended up playing for Wales in the World Cup in 2013. Excuse me. So that's when that was when the decision was made. Then like we're sticking with Wales, because that was the route that we decided to go, and we wanted to play for Wales at that point. Me and Ben had a conversation and said, yes, we've lived in England, but we're Welsh. We want to go and play for Wales together as well. which we did, which is still one of the proudest moments for us both and my mum as well. So yeah, that's when it was the decision was
some accolade that, innit?
yeah, really made when he
Yeah,
was 21. Really, was right. We're definitely playing for Wales now going forward.
yeah. So academy comes along, mate, and who put the because what I didn't realise, because most of my mates signed for witness anyway. You know, when we hit that age group, that multiple clubs can put their hand forward for you, can't they? So how many or who put their hand forward for you? Or was Warrington always the direction you were heading in? Was you not interested?
Um, I don't know of any formal things. I think because we'd made the move and because Warrington had looked after us for 2 years, I don't think any other clubs realistically thought they could get us because we were
Okay.
committed to them, they were committed to us. I think Leeds might have been interested in me from speaking to John Bastian, who then came in as head of youth at Warrington a few years later. And I think Wigan were interested in Ben as well at that point as well, because I think you do get sent a letter if they are interested, but it was nothing really like a formal meeting or anything like that, because at that point we were obviously loyal for Warrington in a sense of giving us 2 years of scholarship training and helping us kind of integrate with moving up here in a sense of getting us into the training and everything. And Warrington wanted to keep us on board because they'd like what they'd seen over them 2 years. So it was a pretty easy decision, really.
And how was it when you choose the professional path? Was college something you went and done, or what were Warrington like regarding your time outside of the club?
No, they were really good. So you sign when you sign your first contract as an academy player, it's like a part-time contract. So at that point in time, training twice a week, I think it was Tuesday, Thursday, and then you play on a Saturday. So you were still in college or kind of like end of high school, kind of at that age, because me and Ben turned 16 in the October and signed our academy contracts in the December. So we was technically still in our last year of high school, but playing academy because we were playing 2 years up.
Right.
And then the following year was then when I started sixth form, but that kind of got disrupted a little bit because we both got picked in the squad for Wales first team at 16, 17. Neither of us played, but we were just in the squad for a month when they were playing in like a European nations, but we were out of school and out of college for a long time. So it kind of had a little bit of an effect on both our education that year, which meant then that we both decided to do BTECs the following year because we kind of both struggled with our A levels because we missed such a large chunk out of it. And at that point, it was coming a bit of a balance of can we really do full time or part time as we were then, as well as education? I think that's that toss of that coin, isn't it? And then when we were 17, the following year, the back end of that year was then when we ended up going full time. Then once we got the BTECs done, we did our first year of BTECs is when we went full time. Then with another four lads as well, because it was at that age where Warrington wanted us to go full time, and we wanted to be full time so we could train more. And that's what came
So
up.
sorry, mate. So at 16, you're playing like men's rugby, really, aren't you? How did you find that? Because you've been, as you said, predominantly the bigger kid, haven't you? The more developed kid. What's it like when it's the other way around for you? Because some of these 18-year-olds, mate, will be in and out the first team, won't they, and things like that.
Yeah, it was a step up, definitely physically, getting used to being like whacked and stuff. But um I was lucky in a sense because I started on the wing. I think it's when you're on the wing, it's not as physical. You're kind of using your attributes, and I scored a decent try in the first game, which was against St Helens, who had been one of the better teams the year before. And the team that we kind of joined, Warrington had a really poor year the year before in the academy because they put a lot of youngsters in. So it was our age and the year above, but they'd had a year of basically getting getting up to
But
speed kind of bit with it. And then we came in and kind of just went on the back of that. I kind of found it pretty. I had a decent first year. I enjoyed it. Played a bit of wing, centre full back, moved around a bit, and I think we ended up in the playoffs that first year with a reasonably young team compared to everyone else. So it was a decent year all around, and it was kind of that, like I said before, that next step in the sense of right, I can do well at this level. What's the next level? Because at that age, I think once we'd moved, I was always looking to go right. What's the next one? What's the next one? Like not resting on the laurels, because the goal is to be in the first team. It's just how quick you're going to get there.
So how do you see the game different from wing to fullback, Rhys?
A lot more running at fullback. Yeah, definitely needs to get fitter doing that. See a lot more high bombs in a sense of like you've got, even though as a winger you're getting kicks in the corner, but they're different because normally it's like a crossfield kick, whereas when you're at fullback, you're getting spirals and it's the wingers normally don't look at you because they're like it's your ball or kind of things like that. So the actual game we lost in the playoff, I had an absolute stinker really. And I didn't play well. I ended up getting moved to the wing. We were playing Bradford, and they had the Burgess twins, Danny Addy, a few lads who went on and made it pro. What's his name now? Joe Wardle, who's at Lee now, who was at Huddersfield. And I had a really bad game, and I got moved to the wing. And then afterwards, I felt really bad because I felt like I'd let the team down because it was a playoff game. It was like, right, that's us now. We're out. But it was one of my best lessons because even though I had a terrible game, I didn't stop trying. And sometimes it does happen. And at that point, I'd not really ever had a bad game. But as you're going into potentially doing it as a job, you're not going to be 10 out of 10 every week. So it was a really good learning curve for me thinking of, right, what do I need to go on and work on if I want to carry on playing fullback, or maybe fullback's not for me. But I needed to work that out myself and also realise that I wasn't going to be perfect every game because now you're playing against players who are either marginally better than you or marginally a little bit below you, but there isn't much difference in it. And if you're not on it, then things can happen.
Yeah. So up until this point, mate, you probably, like you said, hadn't really been tested, had you? So how did you become it, leaving a mistake where it was? Was it something you found easy to move on from an error, or would you stew on it a little bit?
I would if I didn't go and get a carry straight away. So
Yeah.
my attitude was go and get a carry, go and get an involvement straight away, and then just build your confidence up again. I think if you make error after error, that's when your confidence goes. But I only probably got to a point when I was playing first team, and I'm probably thinking about, mid early 20s at that point where I could put it behind me then. I think as a young kid, you're always dwelling on it. But I think when you're older and you realise it's just part of the game, sometimes it happens. It's like, what's the next involvement? What's the next involvement? Because if you make one error, it might not cost the team. But if you make error after error after error because you think about the first one, it probably will. So you've got to kind of put out your mind and just focus on the next thing rather than what's just happened.
Yeah, I suppose it's about just not, like you said, backing up an error with an error, because then
Yeah.
you're chasing your tail, trying to correct something, and you probably make another two doing it. You've just got to be patient. But like we'll talk about, I've no doubt you learned that with a bit more experience, mate, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of just speaking to older lads as well. I think when you go into that first team environment or even like an academy environment where you're one of the young ones, once you've kind of earned your stripes and you've kind of played a few games and they know what you're capable of, that's when you can then go and ask questions and kind of go, well, how do you deal with this? How did you deal with that? Because they've got more experience than you, whether it's another year in the academy or whether they've been a professional for 10, 15 years. Like, you've got to be a bit of like, you've got to watch everything because it's, or ask questions because they're not just going to come over to you and offer it. You've got to
Yeah.
kind of be brave enough to go and go, right, well, how come you do it that way? What's the reason behind it or whatever it might be? And Matt King at Warrington, as well as Monaghan Brothers, were both really good at that with me and Ben. In a sense of giving information, reassurance when you need it, or going, come on, this is your game to kind of shine because you'll get a run in the team. Just them little pick me ups that you need sometimes from time to time.
But when you went away with the Welsh setup, mate, even though it was just to be in and around that type of environment, how was that and how was the environment?
Different because we're still kids and they were all men. So you kind of just getting used to the environment. It was like, just a different environment, different conversations, and kind of just getting used to the intensity of training and playing against full grown men who are fully developed. I remember one of the first sessions, I remember Ben Flower running at me and he ran over the top of me and I was like, right, so this is men's rugby then, kind of thing. And that's how you learn, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you're still growing. Like, one of the worst things, and you'll ask any academy kid this, is when you go into the first gym session with the first team, because everyone's lifting ridiculous weights, and you're thinking, I can't do that, but you don't want to be seen lifting the weights you're doing. So you kind of just go and find like a little rack on the end with maybe one of your mates and go, like, come on, we'll go and do these weights here, kind of thing, because you're just not fully grown yet. So yeah, that was at that point, it was always a little bit intimidating because you're like, right, it's a lot of testosterone here, and we're at the bottom of the queue.
So that experience, mate, you take it back to Warrington, and what's next at Warrington? Is it, how was your first full pre-season, mate? So did you spend long in the academy before the first team come around?
So we had that 1 year in the academy, and then fair play to Warrington. What they would do is they wouldn't hold the team back to try and win the competition. They'd push anyone up who they thought was ready for reserves. So, and reserves was under 20s, and you were allowed 3 overage players. So this is where you'd probably end up playing against fringe first teamers who were coming back from injury or just on, like, say on the fringes or something. So we had a year in the reserves, which we did quite well in, and quite a lot of us pushed up. And then at the back end of that year was then when I signed full time with my brother and 4 other lads as well, because we'd done well that year, and I think they wanted us to get us into the full time setup to see how we could cope with it. And then I ended up getting 1 game at the end of the year for the first team, which was then kind of like, that was a nice kind of thing, right? Well, I've gone from academy to reserves and then got a game in the first team all in 1 year. So it showed that I was going in the right direction.
Yeah, every time, mate, do you feel the lifting in standard as well?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I think at that age, I was just trying to not really think about it. I was thinking, right, well, if I've pushed up to under 20s and I'm 17, then other teams might have done the same. So yeah, I might be playing against lads who were 3 years older or and over. I remember we played against Wigan once. Palacina was playing, and it was kind of like, right, okay, like, this is someone who's obviously a bit of a wrecking ball in the first team. So let's see how we go, kind of thing. And it was kind of a good thing for us in a sense of, like, if we can beat a team that's got 4 or 5 fringe first teamers at Wigan or St Helens, then we're going in the right direction as a group as well as individuals as well. So it just gave you confidence, because these weren't lads who weren't good. They were very good at either reserves or on the fringes of first team, and just hadn't had the luck or run the games that they were looking for.
I suppose it also reaffirms to you that you don't even need to look for a move, really, do you? Because the path's clear for you to see. The opportunities will come if you're patient.
Yeah, I always thought that I'd get a chance. I think it helped me being an outside back. I think out of the 6 of us that were signed at that age, I think 3 were forwards and 2 were halves, and I was the only outside back. So I thought I might get the first shot here, because as an outside back, it's not as physical. My kind of main strengths are already there in a sense of my speed and stuff. So I just need to get a run out, really. Whereas the likes of, for example, my brother James Layfitt, Gaz O'Brien, who are probably in more than positions where, as you get older and you get more experience, you come into your own. They played the year after or the year after that.
Yeah, and you reckon your versatility either helped you or held you back any?
Definitely helped, because at that point I was playing centre for the reserves, but I made my debut on the wing, because I probably wasn't big enough to play centre at that point in the first team. And it was kind of a bit of a trial run, probably from Tony, who was the head coach at the time, going, let's see what you can do. Because I think, and I'm quite interested now, because I do watch more rugby now I've retired. I like watching someone when I'm watching them for the first time, or it's their debut or their first big game, to see how they handle it, because it's more how they handle the occasion rather than the game. Because they're good enough, because that's why they've been picked. It's whether the occasion of, whether it be on Sky or whether it be in a sellout crowd or whether it be in a derby game, for example, is going to overawe them or not. And it's more about, can they handle? Is their character able to handle that, rather than are they good enough from a physical point of view? So yeah, for me, that first game was just, right, go out and show Tony why you're in the first team as well as the other lads, and then you'll get another chance. But if you don't go out and show it, and you're a bit reserved, or you don't do well, then you might not get that again. It's just all about how you perform in that moment, and just thinking about the then and now rather than kind of overthinking it.
Yeah, and how did it go, mate? Do you remember much of it?
Yeah, it went quite well. I think my first touch I made about 30 meters. I kind of stepped a couple of people. I think I came back and made a cover tackle because our fullback got tied in one of the tackles, and I should have been where I should have been in the sense of a tactical point of view because I should be covering for him. So I felt like you kind of know when you come off the field whether you've done a good job or whether you've not, because you get taps on the back if you're good, or someone says, "Oh, well done." Whereas if you're not, no one looks at you. You know what I mean? No one says anything. No one looks at you.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of just don't make eye contact with anyone, do you? So I think after
No,
that game, I kind of felt like, right, okay, I've done well enough to maybe get another chance. And then at this point in time, it was the end of the year, so they just won the Challenge Cup the week before, which is why I played, because I think a few of them were still rough from the week before. And then they were going into a bit of a playoff run then. So I knew it was going to be just this game this year, but playing well in this game might set me up for next year. In a sense of having a good pre-season. He's already seen what I can do in a small portion, because I think I played about 25 minutes. Am I going to get my first start now? When's that going to come? So,
yeah. No, that's it. And it's something for you to take into pre-season games as well, Reece, isn't it? That you sort of, you're on the cusp, aren't you? Like that 25 minutes, really, Tony was smart there. It's like a little taste to put you in, pull you out, put you in, pull you out. Because he's quite a smart bloke, isn't he, when it comes to rugby league. So,
yeah, I think he's very good. He was the best tactical coach I ever had. But I think he's very good at like kind of introducing youngsters into that first team environment and not putting too much on them too soon. So, like you said, I played 25 minutes, did quite well. Then the following year, they always name like a 25-man squad. So that when I played in that game, I just had I think it was number 31. So I just had as a squad number just given to me because I was playing. So then like the following year, they always name like a 25-man squad. And I was named in that. So I thought, well, I've done something right if I've been named in that. And then it was like, right, how early into the season am I going to get a chance now? Because I knew I wasn't going to start because I'd only played obviously one game and there was people ahead of me. But that's when you're thinking, right, lack of form, injuries, and you're just waiting for an opportunity, really. Whether with it being your first start and go, right, I've got 18 minutes here now to prove myself, not just 25 like last year. And hopefully you want it to be against a team that's going to be challenging, so it's more of a statement. My first game was against London, and at that point they were not making the playoffs, so it was a good game for me to play. Whereas the next game you're looking at, you're thinking, right, if it's against one of the teams that have been challenging or won it over the last previous years, it's more of a statement. So that's what I was looking for.
I mean, that's what's separating you as well. Make your mindset's very like most. I don't want to be rude. If I'd have been at your level, I'd have took a London, just to say I've done it. And like I said, me know where I'm at. But you're looking at like, yeah, London's all right. No disrespect to London, but I want to be playing Saints, Wigan, uh, Leeds. You want to be playing the big sides. Like, no offense to people, don't you? You're aiming right up there. Where most young lads would be very happy with like a bottom 2 or 3 team, wouldn't they, just to bed in?
Yeah. I think at that age, and not trying to, I don't want to sound arrogant here, because obviously things did change, and I wanted to be the
Yeah,
best in the world. Basically, at that age, I wanted to be the best in the world, and the only way you could be the best in the world was playing at the best team, winning the trophies, and standing out. And all them things I've mentioned before, they were stepping stones. They weren't the
to
end.
do that.
They weren't the finishing line. And like obviously I didn't get to them heights that I would have liked to, whether it be injuries or whatever it might be. But I think if you always aim high in life, if you come just short, you still finish quite high.
Yeah,
Whereas if you set your goals that are achievable, you don't know whether you can actually do more, if that makes sense.
and that's the mentality and the mindset we're talking about at like 15, 16, 17, isn't it? Them little sacrifices. And like now you can pick out at Christmas. Now you can go out for a few beers or one too many. You can have that all inclusive holiday now if you and your partner can go and do it, can't you? Where everything's reliant on making playoffs, Challenge Cup runs, um, grand finals, which you were around successful squads, weren't you? So when a loan move come along, Reece, how I know I spoke to you slightly off camera about it, but how did you feel and approach a loan move?
It was a little bit of both, really. So I went on loan to Lee that following year. I had a bit of run of games with the first team at Warrington. I played about 8 or 9 games. Got my first start, played really well, but then I actually dipped. So I had a few games where I probably wasn't where I wanted to be, and I think that was probably just the emotion of having a really good game as your first start, and then a bit of a come down period. And then a few of the lads who came back from injuries who were obviously more experienced than me and probably on bigger contracts than me as well. Or I'm not probably definitely were. So they needed to be reintroduced to the first team. So I went on loan to Lee, and I really enjoyed it that year because it was better for me to do that than go back and play reserves because I was playing against men who were either had played in Super League or were aspiring to play in Super League. So it was that level in between the reserves and the first team. And I think at that age, which I would have been probably about 19, I think, or 17, 18, 19, I can't remember. That period made me then grow into being a man playing rugby rather than still a boy because I started to fill out. I started to get used to the wax because I was playing consistently against men every week rather than just in and out.
And it's very attritional, mate. I know everybody says it in previous guests, but the speed isn't there, but the physicality probably makes up for the lack of speed.
Definitely 100% because they were bigger blokes because the game was slightly slower. You were playing against blokes who were probably 16, 17 stone, whereas at that point in Super League, because it was so quick, probably people were
Yeah,
more like 14, 15, maybe 16, the odd one.
yeah.
So it was definitely more physical. You're playing on slower pitches as well because they weren't as well looked after. And at that point, I felt like the championship was probably there was more money in it, so it was probably closer to Super League back then than it maybe has been in recent years or between then and now. We were playing against Featherstone, Widnes, um, teams that were like really physical teams kind of thing, and there weren't as many young kids going on loan then. I was one of a few. So it wasn't like it is now where you're getting 5 or 6 from a Joe Reg, for example, and it's predominantly probably half the team is actually signed on at that club and half the team's on Joe Reg or low. It was 1 or 2. So yeah, it was definitely good for me in a sense of getting physically stronger because then when I went back then at the end of the year to play for Warrington and the following year, I felt like I'd grown into a bit more of a man really rather than still being a kid who was playing with men.
A little bit of a blessing in disguise, mate, in hindsight, really.
Yeah, I thought so, especially because I was playing for Lee at the time, who them and Featherstone were contending at the top. So I was playing in a very good team where I had likes of Chris Hill, Robbie Paul, lads who'd played in Super League and maybe were coming to the end of their career, or in Chris Hill's case, was starting to kick on. And he eventually then ended up signing for Warrington not long after that. Kind of thing because there was a bit of a link between the two clubs there. So that's probably when the era of the likes of Alex Walmsley, Chris Hill, the Super League were looking in the Championship to see who was the next one, if that makes
Few
sense.
gems.
Yeah,
That's why I never out being rude to other clubs, because obviously I'm from Widnes and that, mate. Because we've been in and around them clubs, I can't believe we were getting bypassed. When we've had first-hand experience of them, because there are some real gems in the champ, mate, isn't there? And
exactly. I think that's the thing. I think it I don't know whether it was Saints who got Walmsley. I think Walmsley was the first. I think when
yeah,
Saints got Walmsley and he came on and obviously he's had a great career, I think the light bulb went off for everyone. And it was kind of like, well, maybe we should do the same because, I can't imagine Walmsley would have been on a massive contract when he signed to go full time because he would have been he would have been had a job, he would have been part time. And I think I don't know his contract situation, but he's probably earning a lot more now than he ever did when he first started because no one knew what his value was. And at that point, he just wanted to play full time rugby. And as you settle in and you become one of them gems, like you say, then you can start dictating what you're going to get in your next contract and vice versa. So I think clubs were looking for a gem on the cheap for a couple of years, if that makes sense.
no, it is. It's the little hidden gems that you can not sort of discard, but you're giving them an opportunity, aren't you? Probably because I swore to a few. If a club wants to get rid of you, they can. But if a player wants to leave, he can in rugby league, can't he? So
Yeah,
say you give the next Walmsley or Chris Hill a 2-year deal, and it doesn't work after a year, you can sort of feed them back into the champ, can't you? And it
Yeah,
won't be an issue. They won't be costing you a fortune, and getting rid of them won't cost you a fortune. But if they really kick on, you've made a steal, and you look like you know what you're doing, then, don't you? So
it's a
it is
win-win
that
either
fine
way,
line.
innit? It's a win-win either
Yeah,
way, innit?
yeah. It's like going on Footy Manager and scouting the champ for a bit in it and seeing what comes up. So did repping Wales at the World Cup come on the back of the Lee spell, mate?
I'm trying to think now. I'm trying to remember the years now. Um,
If it
I
was,
think
it
I had
wouldn't have been far away, would it?
yeah, I think it was on the back of that, and then I had a few more games in the first team because the first couple of years in the first team kept getting niggling injuries. So I think at the start of 2012, which was the year before the World Cup with Wales, we went away to Australia for pre-season, did really well in that. Came back, played the first game against Holloway, scored in that last minute try to get us a draw. Following week, played London at home, and I had a really good game again. And then I rolled my ankle in training, just doing a little 2v1 session, like mess around that we used to do before training. And then I was out the team for 6 weeks. And then Chris Riley, who obviously was a very good player, came in, and then he had a really good run in the team. So because the competition was so kind of close, it was getting a bit of luck as well as getting a run in games. So at the end of that year, I think we only played about 5 games in total, but I started the first two, so it shows how it can change. And then played for England Knights then in 2012. And then the following year, then after that was when I ended up playing for Wales then, because my brother played for Wales the year before. We had a bit of a conversation in the sense of it's the World Cup, we're both from Wales, let's do this together. We might never do it again, which we never did. And played in the World Cup then, and it was the curtain raiser was England v Australia, and then Wales versus Italy at the Millennium. So it was set
Yeah,
up nicely to do that.
mate. So just a few things before we touch on the World Cup then. So the nights, how did that come about, and how was that for you?
It came about. I remember exactly where I was because my mate was working at one of the pubs in Grappenhall, so I'd gone to see
Right.
him for a catch up.
You boss bugger.
And even I don't think I'd passed my driving test by this point, so he was driving. I got in the car with him, and my phone went off. And I didn't. Even to this day, I never answer my phone if I don't know the number. If I leave a voicemail, then I'll ring him back because it's obviously someone who wants to get in touch. And it was Steve McNamara had left me a voicemail saying I want to have a chat with you. So I was thinking, where's this come from? And then just had a conversation with him. He said, I want you to be part of the night setup. And I was like, yeah, great. Because at this point, I hadn't had contact from Wales for a while. And I thought, well, because between that and then we played for England Academy. See, we played for England Academy 2 years previously against the Aussies, and we won. So at this point, I was technically still in the England setup, and I got scouted for that, and obviously went into that. And at this point, Ben was, I think, I'd had a bad injury, so he was still playing reserves. And Ben then went and played for Wales because Wales had a few games as well, like international games at that point. So we were both doing different things at that point. He was playing for Wales, and I was playing for England Knights.
And injuries wise, mate, had you been pretty lucky up until like you rolled your ankle in training and stuff? Was it just daft ones?
So I'd broken my foot and I had a screw in that. And I'd also broken my hand playing for Lee whilst I was on that loan period with Lee. So I'd had a couple of injuries, but just a few niggly ones. And I think at that
Not
point,
daft ones though, are they? A screw in your
no,
foot's not daft, like, yeah.
no. I think as I've got older, because I've had 3 shoulder ops, so I always see them as the bigger ones. But
Yeah.
at the time, they were obviously quite bad ones, but not as bad as them. And I think because the Warrington at that point were pushing for a Super League win, it was very hard to get in the team if you weren't fit consistently. And I'd had a few injuries and a few bumps, so I was always kind of in for a couple out, and kind of that was how it was going for them first 2 years. I think at the time, I think I'd been full time for 3 years and only played 24 games, which isn't really a lot.
Yeah.
So at this point, I was trying to find a way into the first team consistently and actually be a starting player for a whole year at least to then go into that next phase of my career, basically.
And then going on to the World Cup, mate, and what an experience that must have been with you and Ben, and like rejoining, like because like you said, you'd have semi grew up in England, but you are Welsh, mate, aren't you? And you're both proud of that, which there's nothing up with. So how was it going back and first sticking the jersey on and just playing together as well?
It was great, to be honest. It was really good fun because I think that was one of the things I realised the difference between the night setup and Wales was how much more relaxed Wales was. I think with England, there was always a bit more of an expectation. So when I played for England Knights, we played against, I think it was Scotland and Ireland, and we were expected to win, even though we were like the second team in one sense. But then when we went away with the World Cup with Wales, it was kind of like, let's just enjoy it, let's have fun. Lads got into me a little bit because I had to do a few forfeits for playing for England and stuff like that, which was always quite fun, which my brother did the year before. So the actual game that we played in against Italy, I've got a Mohican, so that's not our choice. That's because of a forfeit. And it never grew back the same ever since. Um, so yeah, kind of a bit of kind of break the ice with all them kind of with all that, and then just kind of enjoy the tournament and just kind of take it all in because it was your first World Cup, so it's kind of like you don't know what to expect. Just enjoy it. Obviously, enjoy playing in the curtain raiser at Millennium, which was a proud moment for the whole family, and we got friends coming. We had friends come to watch that as well. So yeah, it was just a really enjoyable experience.
Right. And when you played for Wales, was it almost like a mini reverse? Was you know how to play what you see instead of being like structured out? Like you can be over structured sometimes, Reece, can't you? And the game sort of feels robotic sometimes, mate, even at the amateur level. But some coaches do give you that free roll, don't they?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit like that because Wales didn't have the resources that like obviously England, Australia's and stuff had. So we didn't spend much time together. So it was kind of like we'd go through the playbook and kind of we had a trial game, I think, beforehand, and we had a few sessions up in North Wales. But it was kind of like there's no expectation. Just we want you to go out and make and wear the jersey and do the jersey proud and do the country proud. But you're there to enjoy it because we weren't expected to go and win it. It
Yeah,
was just more about having fun, and we were actually disappointed in that year because we lost to Italy, the Cook Lions, and the USA. But it was at that point where a lot of them teams were getting lads who weren't playing for Australia and New Zealand who had some sort of grandparent or parent that was from them countries. So they were just as strong as they were basically NRL teams, really. So it was hard for us, really, because I think we went into that Italy game expecting to beat Italy, but they had the likes of the Minicello brothers, Paul Vaughan, who's now
oh,
at
well,
Wellington,
yeah.
Aidan Guerra, like they had quite a lot to do, even to the like Tedesco who plays for St. Roosters now. He played for him. So like
First time,
yeah, exactly. So they had half a team that was basically NRL, like top quality kind of thing. So it was the experience was really good, but I think the games kind of we were a bit upset at the time. But actually looking back at them now, I think well the players that have played in them games who've now gone and played in state of origins for Australia or whatever it might be, you can kind of go, right, well, we can see why we're on the wrong end of the scoreline.
again, it's like it's that target for you, mate, isn't it? I know we probably. I'm 23 at that point. You're younger than me, but they still aren't really 100% established in the NRL at that point, are they? So you're playing against future stars without knowing the caliber of them. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I think at this point with Wales and also with Warren as well, because I'd had a few injuries. I probably was stuck at the level that I was maybe 2 years before. So, and at this point, it was kind of like everyone is on an even keel now. So
yeah,
it's very hard to stand out on your own. The actual 17 that were playing was vital in the sense of everyone had to play their part now because at that age it's more of a team game then, kind of thing. So it was definitely a good experience to have, and like I said, I loved it, and I'm pretty gutted that I never got a chance to play in any, and then another one because of injuries, kind of thing because it seems such a long time ago now since I actually did it.
okay. So, just out of interest, when the Crusaders come in Super League, did they not try and recruit the likes of you and Ben and the bigger Welsh names to forefront what they tried the Crusaders to represent, or was it never banded to you?
No, we did have a chat with them. They had a
Yeah,
chat with us. I think it might have been that England Wales game when we were about 16, 17. They had a chat with us, but at this point, we spent so much time and effort to relocate up here. We were never going to come back. And it, with the Celtic Crusaders coming in, it was for the first couple of years, it was obviously just to see how they went. And obviously, unfortunately, it didn't hang around for too long. They relocated to North Wales, and then after a few years, they kind of faded out of the sport then. So whereas Warrington was established, they'd been in obviously Super League for since it started, and it felt more secure. And obviously, like I said, we'd done all the stuff where we'd moved up, and don't think we could have gone through that again in that sense.
yeah.
So our minds were made up to stay where we were.
Yeah. And before we move on with your career, mate, did rugby union ever knock on the door while you were still playing elite level rugby league?
Yeah, they did. So when I was leaving Warrington, before I signed for Lee, I was looking at maybe going to rugby union at the time just to change it up. At one point, I think the Nethy Scarlets were interested, but at the time, it wasn't the right move for me in the sense of location. Just bought a house as well up here. Was studying for college as well at the time, and it felt more safer in a sense to stay where I was, to stick in the sport that I was already kind of made half my name in, and stay in rugby league.
So was leaving Warrington very amicable when it was known you were leaving? Who was interested? I know you went to Leeds, didn't you? But who was showing a bit of keen to get you?
Yeah, it was amicable. Like the year before my brother had left, which I think had a little bit of to play a part to play in it a little bit. And quite a lot of the lads who I'd played with in the 24-14 season had left as well. That year was kind of the breakthrough year for all of us. As like the group that came up in the reserves with me, we got to the semi-final of the Challenge Cup, and we got to the semi-final of the semi-final for the grand final, and just lost to Wigan in the last minute. So they all kind of moved on the year after that because we had a disappointing year in 2015. And I just fancied a change. I think I just wanted to go and see what it was like elsewhere, kind of thing. So at the point, it was Lee, I think Salford were interested in Wakefield as well. And at the time, I thought Lee were obviously in Super League at that time. And I thought it was the right option for me and my partner at the time and to go there.
Yeah. Along with the studying and that, mate, it's only down the road, such a thing, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a clever move, really. So how was it second time round at Lee, mate? Did you feel like it was another opportunity to really kick on? Because you've mentioned you felt like you didn't use the word stagnate, and I don't want to be rude saying stagnate, but you'd sort of settled at a level you felt you were better than, hadn't you? And was this the opportunity to kick on?
Yeah, well, I had a shoulder injury at Warrington in the May before going to Lee, so I was still recovering from that. And I still wanted to play rugby and just enjoy it. That was the main thing for me. And I think you always have a shelf life somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and fair play to anyone who's at the same club the whole career, and they're wanted by that club for that whole period as well. Kind of thing. Like, I look at, for example, Benny Westwood, who was basically at Warrington for the whole of his career, and that was great. But for me, I felt like I needed a change, and going to Lee, unfortunately, they got relegated that year. And my main focus was to come back from my injury and kind of to help them get promoted at that point, which unfortunately didn't happen. But I just wanted to kind of just enjoy my rugby, start playing again, and just being a different like kind of setup.
How did you find it, Lee? Enjoyable, mate?
Yeah, there's a really good group of lads, really good group of coaches. Like it was a tough year because we didn't finish in the top four.
Yeah.
But no, I think anything in life, it's always an experience. And I think you learn things from things, whether they go well or whether they don't. And then I took that on to my next stage then, which is when I went to Bradford then after that,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And kind of decided to kind of officially go part-time, really. Because at that point, Bradford was hybrid. So kind of went that way. And that's when I started thinking more about life after rugby then, because it was kind of the difference from going from full-time to the hybrid setup that Bradford had. It got me when I was turning 25, I think, as well. So in my head, I was halfway through my career anyway. It was time to now start to think, let's still enjoy however many years I've got left in rugby, but also start planning for the future, because whether it's an injury, which I'd had a few injuries obviously beforehand, or whether it's just I get to a point where I'm ready to hang my boots up, I need to start thinking about the future now and what I want to do.
So, did anyone else offer that hybrid environment for you, mate, or was Bradford the straightforward decision?
It was a new thing, really. I think it was. It was more for championship teams. So at this point, I played a few games for Lee. I'd had a problem with my shoulder as well, so I hadn't had a full year playing with Lee. So it kind of, when it came to the end of the year where I was looking to go elsewhere, there wasn't as many choices. But I knew John cared from the Wales setup, and I just fancied giving it a go. I still wanted to play rugby. So the way they set it up, it was 4 times a week and it was hybrid because some lads had jobs. So it was the gym sessions were stagnated, depending on whether you were working or whether you weren't. And then we train in the evenings all together and then play on a Sunday. So it was what I kind of fancied doing at the time, was maybe taking a little bit of a step back from full time and getting back to the point where I was enjoying it to the same levels I was maybe a few years before.
And hopefully getting recovered as well, mate, isn't it? Instead of playing with the niggles and things and looking after yourself a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of being a professional athlete, is over time your body does end up wearing a bit. And I think maybe with myself, my body started wearing a bit earlier than what I thought it would. And as I got older and I carried on playing till I was 30, I probably was never the same player I was in my early to mid 20s, just through injuries and stuff like that. But you get more experienced, so you learn how to play and be smarter compared to when you're younger, when you're just running around like a headless chicken, really, isn't it? Kind of thing. So
Flying into all sorts of tackles and stuff.
exactly, yeah. Like when someone's been around the block, because when it comes to pre-season or training sessions, they take their time and they're not setting records at the start of the session. They do it when they have to, kind of thing. Kind of thing. So I ended up becoming into that kind of group in my late 20s, kind of thing, compared to one of the young guns.
Have you ever all changed, mate? Is leadership starting to become a thing now for you in like your new environment?
Yeah, it did at Bradford. I think I was just giving a little bit of advice to young lads who were coming through, whether that be like contract stuff or whether it just be how to get in, to kind of get the coach on side, whether it be training or attitude towards things or whatever it might be. And I always wanted to be kind of open to a young lad to come and speak to me and say, what do you think about this? Because that's what I kind of wanted when I was coming through the system, is that reassurance from time to time. So yeah, I was more than happy to kind of help anyone out when they needed it, whether they were young or whether they were old and they just needed to talk about something, which probably leads into what I do now as a living, where it's kind of talking with people and trying to help them out with their finances, probably come from that, really.
Right. So without knowing it, mate, not without knowing it. So you are looking to set up the next stage of your life, aren't you? Off the field. Not to the degree that you probably did do, listening to what you've just said. But how was your spell at Bradford? And did people lean on you a fair bit, mate, which led to you to do what you're doing now? And just tell people what you do now as well.
Yeah, I think when I went to Bradford, my kind of perspective of, because I was a bit older, I'd had obviously 8 or 9 years being full time. I kind of had the attitude of, obviously, I'm going there as a senior player. I want to be able to do my part on the field, but I also want to contribute, whether that be in like a leadership group or whether it be helping players out with just daily living things. Like, sometimes someone just needs to chat, don't they? Just to get someone off the test or whatever it might be. And I think I've always been quite conscious of how other people are feeling, in a sense. So with me now going into my new career now as a mortgage advisor, it's similar because I've always had a kind of a passion for property and stuff like that anyway. So it's putting the two together where I'm helping them with their finances and helping them hopefully get something that's going to be a big part of their life and a big moment of their life. But it's also something I'm interested in myself in the sense of properties, and because we rented when we first came up to Warrington, and then my mum bought one, and then me and Ben bought one together, and it was kind of like that first step on the ladder, and I was quite intrigued by it. So it was something that I always thought I might do as I get older when I retire, which is probably why I started thinking about it at the back end of my career a little bit earlier, because I wanted to do something else that I was enjoyed doing. I didn't want to go into a job that maybe I thought this isn't for me. And I really enjoy what I do now. And hopefully I can do that for a lot longer.
Yeah. Again, what I say to most people, mate, and a lot of the guests is highly transferable skills from the field to the business life, and connecting with people, the way mannerisms, the way you speak, you're very clear, you're very literate, direct. It's all transferable, mate, isn't it? And people can buy into someone that's real, Rhys, can't they? And people can see people that are real and that are not, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that I probably learned as I got older is, like you say, there's a lot of skills when it comes to being a rugby player that are transferable into the real world. Like one of the most simplest ones is like having an interview on Sky or after the game in one of the bars where there's 30, 40 sponsors or what might be. It's talking in front of an audience. Now that's something that's quite transferable to if you work in sales or whether you're like in charge of a company or, for example, something like that. So it's one of them things that I think rugby players take for granted until actually someone says, no, actually that's a skill that's used in the real world that you can use in whatever job you decide to go in. So there's loads of transferable skills, like you say, like leadership on the field, taking that into a leadership role off it, which we maybe don't touch on enough when people do get to that in later years and they want to go into a new career. And I know the RLKs, which is a foundation that are involved with the Rugby Football League, help out with that in helping players transition, whether that be funding for courses or whatever it might be. But yeah, there's definitely some things you can learn from playing rugby or any sport for a period of time that will help you going into the next phase of your life.
So Bradford, mate, how was it at Bradford? And a little off topic, but I know I said to you as we come on before we start recording, but one of the strange moves that I seen, like a loan to Leeds, mate, like rivals becoming friends sort of thing, isn't it? And
Yeah.
you're floating there. So talk us about your spell at Bradford and then how the move to Leeds come about.
Yeah, so spell at Bradford first year, really enjoyed it. It kind of felt like I was back playing with, like I was young. So like, I think one of the things that sometimes when you play professionally, whether it might be full time or whatever it might be, is you're not always best friends with every teammate you've got, which I think sometimes fans think that's the case. Like, you're really good friends with some and others you were colleagues with. And I think at Bradford was probably the team where I got on with everyone. Like, I think because everyone, quite a lot of the people, like the lads, had jobs as well as playing. They just wanted to go there and have fun. So it was very similar to when we were kids, really. You're doing it for the love of the game rather than what you're getting paid for, kind of thing. And really enjoyed that first year. Fortunately, got another injury again, which I did my shoulder for the third time, which was tough to deal
Same
with.
one.
No, it was the other one. So I'd done the other one twice, and then I did
Yeah.
this was the other one. So I thought this one was a good one, and then that one went. And then came back at the end of the year, finished the year with Bradford. I think we just missed the playoffs, but we had a really young squad, which was one of the reasons why John brought me on board. And then I started pre-season the following year, and I think it was so. You used to have you still do. You have the Boxing Day games, which no players like because you just want, like you say, you just want to have your Christmas off. And as you get older, they get even worse because when you're younger, you just want to play, but when you're older, you just like, I just want to enjoy my Christmas dinner, kind of thing. So we did a team run. I think it was on the 23rd, and I was driving home from Bradford, and I had a phone call from the agent. And I thought, what? Why is he ringing me? Like, like it's a bit of an odd time to be ringing me 2 days before Christmas. And basically Richard Agard took over from Leeds the year before when I think it was David Furner who had got sacked. And basically we're looking for some outside back cover because they had a few injuries in the back line. Obviously had a quick chat on the phone, me and my agent, and he said Richard's going to ring you in a bit. So I spoke to Richard, and it sounded all really good. And I thought, right, this is my last opportunity now to see if I can still play Super League. Kind of like, it's not about the money, it's not about how long the deal's for. It's just like, right, go there for a year, however long it's going to be. See if you can still hack it at Super League. If you're not, then you know if you can. It's a nice little kind of note to finish off playing Super League. And kind of being able to play for another team in Super League other than Warrington. So yeah, went over to there because at this point I think Bradford and Warrington had a bit of a relationship because Bradford had been in the Championship for a few years, and I think from a Leeds fan and I think from the people behind the scene at Leeds as well, they want Bradford back in the Super League because it's a very big fixture, isn't it? So I think Bradford got 2 youngsters in return. I went the other way and basically had a year there where I played a handful of games, and it worked out quite well actually because it was the year when COVID hit. So I actually still got a chance to play rugby, whereas if I'd stayed at Bradford, once COVID hit, the Champions season was called off. So they didn't. Some of them lads didn't play for about 8 to 9 months, whereas because I'd gone to Leeds, at least when everything came back to some kind of normality after we had the lockdown period, I was able to play a few games, even though there was no fans. But at that level, to see that I could still do it, it's just whether I was good enough to do it for longer. But I was quite content with that at Leeds. I played 5 games, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the club. It's a great club, great people there. And it was nice for me to just kind of go, right, I can do it. But I'm going into that next phase now where probably full-time isn't for me because I was 28, 29 at that point. And like I said, I was thinking more about after rugby, and the travel to Leeds and the full-time element of it was all right for a year, but maybe longer than that probably wasn't the way to go.
So what was next, mate? Come after Leeds.
So I spoke to Leeds at the end of that year. Originally, they wanted to keep me, but then because of finances and because of COVID, it didn't work out that way, which was fine. They were really honest about that and told me straight away. And it meant that then when I could go back to Bradford and speak to Bradford and go, do you want me to come back? And they were like, yes. So I signed a 2-year deal at Bradford. And probably at that point, I thought, right, this might be my last contract. Because at this point, I was thinking, right, I know what I want to do. I'm going to start getting my training in and all that kind of stuff. I've got 2 years at Bradford to set myself up, as well as enjoy the last bit of my career. And kind of, get ready for life after rugby, really.
Yeah. So how was that last 2 years? Was it a bit of like you've got nothing to lose, you know, because you know what your next step is, or you're targeting what your next step was? Was the freedom there, Rhys?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that first year. So the first year of that, we had a really good squad. We had Danny Brufford come and sign for us. I think we finished 4th or 5th in the league, and we'd beaten teams that were above us because it was a very tight championship table at that point. And we kind of fizzled out in the playoffs, really. I think, and that was partly probably down to the fact that a lot of them lads hadn't played for 8 or 9 months, and they were back in training full time in October. When I think I finished for Leeds that year in the November because the season was delayed. So I had about a month off, didn't come back until December. They trained from October, and that playoff game was in the back end of September. So they'd had 12 months in solid. So I think a lot of that group were just worn out. So that was a really good year. That was probably one of my favourite years at Bradford. And then the year after that, the team didn't start too well. And then I actually had a seizure. So I was out, didn't play for 4 months, which I didn't. What's that, sorry?
Was it from head match? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it wasn't. It was just a random thing. So went and did team run on the Saturday. We had a game on the Sunday. Just started getting a bit of a headache, and then I was out in Liverpool city centre with my girlfriend, and I just passed out. and woke up in an ambulance. I was thinking, what's going on here? So that was a bit of a shock. And then they had to do all the tests and results to make sure everything was fine, which took a bit of time. And at this point, then, when I had that 3-4 months off, I was also thinking, right, is this a sign my body can't handle it anymore?
Yeah.
And also, I had 3-4 months off to kind of, because at this point in time I qualified as a mortgage advisor, so I had 4 months working on that, and it was a sign. I was like, right, I'm ready to do this now. So it kind of really sealed my decision in the sense of, right, this will be my last year because of what's happened.
I think it was, mate. Yeah, and is everything okay since, mate?
Yeah, touch wood, everything's been fine since. I had all the checks and everything was fine. It looks like it was just a one-off. But the most difficult thing was I wasn't able to drive for 12 months. So yeah, for 12 months I was kind of back in school, getting ferried round and trying to work and get to places and here, there, and everywhere. Which thankfully it's not the case now. I can drive now, but there was a lot going on behind the scenes there, which made rugby not the most important thing.
Yeah. I don't even think that really takes point then, doesn't it? But there's more. There's life outside of rugby. Some fans don't know that, do they? But there certainly is, mate. It's just a nice little additive, but fundamentally, mate, you've got to go and live your life before, during, and after rugby. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that was always in the back of my mind. I think it wasn't something I ever thought about when I was young, but when I started picking up injuries and having little setbacks, and then as I got older, more of the serious injuries, and then obviously the issue in my head, you start thinking, well, how long can you do it for?
Yeah.
You know, it's been a dream to be a professional rugby player and do it for 13 years, but it does have its toll, whether that be physically, whether that be mentally, and everyone kind of decides when it's right for them, whenever that may be. And for me, after that happened, it was kind of like, right, I think I returned back to Bradford in the July, I think, and about 4 or 5 games, and I was going out playing, thinking, hoping it doesn't happen again, rather than actually just going and playing and enjoying the game.
Yeah.
That's when you know, right, okay, your head's not fully in it, because you're too busy worrying about obviously what's happened, which obviously was a big thing, rather than actually just going out and playing, because I didn't get any answers of why it happened. It just happened. So yeah.
About it's when it can become like incredibly more serious. That
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, you have got a life after rugby, and you want to live it to the full, don't you?
of course you do, mate. Of course you do. Which now you're doing, mate. So talk to us about how things have been since Bradford and what you've been doing and how you're enjoying it.
No, it's been great. Like, it's nice to have your weekends back, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, work's been really good. Enjoying that. It has been a little bit tricky with the financial market as it is now, but that's just part of life. You just got to get on with it, kind of thing. But no, just having a bit more balance to life. Like, my partner's she's been studying to be a psychologist for 3 years. And there was a lot of times when she was coming in the door, I was going out the door for training, and kind of just passing each other by all the time. Where it's nice now actually to have some time together, kind of thing. And both switch off from work on a Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, and have the weekend to go and do what we want, which we never really had for a long period of time. Because either I was playing rugby or she was working because she had so much on her plate at the time. So it's nice to have a bit more balance to things, and nice to just be a fan again. Just watch the games. Just I do a bit of radio now with BBC Merseyside, so I do a bit of the radio games for that, which I enjoy. So it's still kind of being involved with it, but not playing. So I can comment on how bad someone's playing now without me.
But not feeling guilty.
Exactly. Yeah. So I enjoy it. It's good fun. Gets me out of the house for a bit. So, and like I say, it's made me enjoy the game more now because I'm just watching it as a fan rather than watching it going, oh, I'm playing against him next week.
You've just found the little life luxuries that you've just not been able to do, mate, haven't you? And you're enjoying yourself, which is nice to hear.
Yeah, I think it's like you say when we talk about sacrifices and the things behind the scenes that maybe people don't see. It's like, it's like even booking a holiday. So you'd have to wait till you finish your season, not knowing when you finish, to book your holiday. be last minute. It's probably going to cost an arm and a leg because it's last minute. There's only a certain number of places you can go to in October and November, which is when we normally had time off. Whereas this December now, after I retired, me and my girlfriend went to New York, which I've never been to before, which I would have never been to around Christmas time because I would have been pre-season. So like them, I know it's probably not a big thing to everyone else, but to us it was because it was like done that. So it was nice.
When you play, you don't know like if your partner's used annual leave or not because stuff can happen in life, or because the girls want to go away, for instance, and you're too busy running like Malcolms and stuff. And I'd much rather you were on the beach than running a Malcolm. By the way, I know most rugby league players will know that, won't they? But
Yeah,
it is what we spoke about, mate. The little, well, they're not little, but the sacrifices that fans just don't appreciate. Sometimes, like we don't, people that are interested in you, we don't appreciate it either. We think it's living the dream, and sometimes it isn't.
yeah. I think it's because like if everyone said to me, "Do you have to sacrifice some things to do what you've done for 13 years?" and of course I do them, but I think after time they become harder and harder to sacrifice, if that makes sense. Because you're coming to the end of it, you want to be able to enjoy that kind of lifestyle and that freedom that you've not had for a large period of your life doing what you've been doing. So I think that's why you see a lot of rugby players or sports people generally when they finish, they do go and travel. They do go out and have a drink now and again because there'll be times where probably be like maybe between 3 and 6 months without having a beer just because of how the game will finish. And I know you don't need a beer to socialise and stuff, but it is nice sometimes to just go out and let your hair down wherever you got left of it anyway, kind of thing, and just have a couple of beers with your mate or with the family or wherever it might be. And it was always dictated to by the schedule for the week or whatever it might be. So it's nice to kind of, and I think that's probably why I enjoy being self-employed as well. Is I choose when I work, I choose when I do things. It's nice that I can do that because it was kind of set in stone for me for a large part of me working life where I had to be here on a certain time to do this session and stuff like that.
Literally, I bet you went out for your tea sometimes. You're getting side-eyed looking at what was on your plate and that by fans.
I did when it came to going out on a night out. Sometimes it would be like because I had long blonde hair there, so I kind of stuck out a little bit. So if it gets to the point where I consciously didn't go out in Warrington after a loss. So say for example we'd planned a night out on the Saturday because we played on the Friday and the following game was on the Sunday, so it was a 9-day turnaround. You'd probably go out and have a drink or social because you've got a long period between games, and it would get to the point where I'd probably go out in Newtonley Willows, which is where I used to live, for a point rather than going to Warrington for that reason. I wanted to avoid
any bother.
Yeah, just to have a night, enjoy it, and kind of switch off from rugby. Really, I think. Because I understand why fans love rugby. Obviously, they'll wait all week till the game's on and stuff like that. But if you're talking about your job every minute of every day, you do need a breather sometimes. Kind of thing. So it's nice to just switch off and go and speak to your mates or your family where you're not talking about rugby. You're talking about what they're doing or how what's been going on in their life and stuff like that, rather than it being the same thing all the time.
Matching, mate. I've got a few daft questions for you, Rhys. So, any pre-match superstitions? Right, the toughest player you played with. Oh, you have got some. Sorry.
Yeah, so I used to. Yeah. For a large part of my career, I used to strap both my wrists. So some people used to say to me, "Oh, have you got bad wrists?" I was like, "No, I used to just have them strapped because it just used to make them feel like I had more grip on the ball." Just one of them silly superstitions, but I know I wasn't too bad. There was players that had some really bad ones, like sitting on the same seat on the bus if it was an away game, getting strapped at a certain time, going in the shower at a certain time. But I was never one of them. I was pretty chilled with it, to be honest.
Mate, the toughest player you played with and against, and the word toughest has got different definitions for everybody.
Toughest player I played with probably was Michael Monaghan. He wasn't the biggest, and he moved into playing hooker after a while. But he would always get knocks to his head. This is where HIAs didn't really kind of happen in those days.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't as it is now. Would get injuries and keep playing. And he was the toughest because he was kind of like having a coach on the field. He was so smart. And I'm not surprised he's gone into coaching. He was him and Brazy were the main two leaders when I was coming through of that Warrington team, because he would always speak up in team meetings. So he was definitely the toughest player I played with in a sense of all round, not just physically, it was just everything else that comes into it.
What about against mates? Anyone stand out? Maybe someone used to give you a tough afternoon every time you played him and out like that.
For me, he didn't play opposite me. He wasn't in a position opposite me. But every time we played against him, when he didn't play, we'd always feel more confident that we could beat him. And when he did, he'd always make them play better, which was Sean O'Loughlin for Wigan. Like, it's one of the games that really bugged me is that 2016 grand final, because if he hadn't played and he hadn't played for 8 weeks, he came back and played in that game, I think we would have won.
Yeah.
But he just came in, gave them all a bit of a lift, run the game, because he wasn't just physically dominant. He was another ball player as well. His rugby IQ was obviously very smart as well. So the difference he would make to that team when he did play to when he didn't was massive. And yeah, I might have a Super League ring if it wasn't for him.
No, you're not wrong, mate. So your favourite away ground?
Leeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people say Leeds. Like, it's very, very popular.
Yeah. The atmosphere, I always felt like a very wide pitch. Like, kind of things which suited me with being a bit more space. And I think my first start was against Leeds, but at Halliwell, I always felt like Leeds was a game that I always felt I was up for. I really enjoyed playing it. Like, even when I played for Leeds against Warrington, which was quite funny, which was one of them 5 games, it was the other way around. I was like going, and I was at Halliwell Jones as well, so it was kind of like going home playing for Leeds, where 10 years ago it was the way around at the same stadium. So it was, so yeah, I always felt like playing Leeds. I always felt like that was the game for me.
Growing up, mate, they were the benchmark for us, them and Saints, weren't they? So no doubt that was like one of the fixtures to circles with the mindset you have.
Definitely, I think if we're talking about the best team I ever played against, it was that Leeds team in 2015 when they won all 3. When Rob Burrow, Kev Sinfield, James Woodcamp, they were all at the end of their careers, but they were still at the peak. And I remember coming back off an injury, and we played them at Headingley, and we got beat like 50 points to 10. And I've never physically felt as worse in any other game. And I felt like I wanted to just get on the bus and cry. Yeah, kind of thing. So, and that's when they were just that good. They were way ahead of everyone else.
Times, weren't they? So if you could go back, mate, what would you tell a younger you?
Probably look after yourself a little bit more off field when I got into the first team.
Yeah.
So in a sense of like doing extras, working on the like mobility, injury prevention, because I think I probably could have played a lot more games than what I did if I'd probably done a bit more of that. Injuries happen, but you can always do more to try and help them. So probably that really. And I may have got maybe another 50 games out of me, maybe somewhere like that. So yeah, that was probably what I would say. Because I think when injuries do happen, because it's such a short career, when you do have an injury, it will set you back for a period of time. So if you can try and prevent getting injured at a young age and get 50 to 100 games under your belt, Super League level or whatever level it might be, without an injury, it'll set you up then for the rest of your career, because you've already played 100 games at 19 or 20 years of age, which is what I would have liked to have done, but unfortunately injuries have kind of stopped me from doing that at a younger age.
Right, so say you'd had a few and you're in Newtonley Willows, keeping yourself to yourself, and somehow the microphone ends up in your hand. What are you giving us on karaoke?
It would have been a Tom Jones song, but I don't know now anymore. I do like Coldplay now. I've been to watch
Right.
Coldplay a few times. They're probably Coldplay, Viva La Vida, like kind of thing, something like that.
So, mate. So, if you're willing to, I want to 13 that you played with, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Obviously we spoke about this pre coming on. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the best 13 I had from Warrington because I was there for 7 years.
Yeah.
Because the other clubs I've been at, it's hard to remember who was there when I was there because I was only there for brief times.
Yeah.
So if I'm picking a Warrington best 13, probably picking Brett Hodgson at fullback,
Yeah.
uh, Man of Steel at Huddersfield, and had 2 very good years with us. On the wings, probably picking definitely Joel Monaghan.
Yeah.
He was outstanding try scorer. And I'd probably put Matt King on the wing actually,
Yeah.
because it's obviously state of origin Australia. Centres, I would go with Chris Bridge and Ryan Atkins,
Yeah.
both England internationals. Bridgie could have played half as well. Um, Halfbacks is a tough one. Definitely picking Brazy, just because he
Yeah.
was streets ahead of everyone else. And then toss up between Sandow or Gidley. Um, Probably go with Sandow just because he was just like, he could just do anything out of nowhere. Gidley
Yeah.
was going to be similar to Brazy in the sense of how he controlled the game. Michael Monaghan at 9, no doubt
Yeah.
about it. Front rowers, Chris Hill and Ashton Sims, just because I played with
Yeah.
them for longer. I could have said Gaz
Yeah.
Carville and Morley there, but I didn't play with them for as long as I did with them.
Right.
Um, um, Trent Waterhouse, back row, probably with Ben Curry. I think Ben Curry was the one out of the group that I was in who's made it as a big superstar in a sense of like his longevity in the game. And he's had a couple of bad knee injuries, but he's had a great career so far. And hopefully he can do a bit more. And then loose forward, probably because I got on with him really well. I didn't play with him that long, but he was probably the most skillful player I ever played with was Dave Solomona.
Yeah.
Like great fella off the field, like typical Kiwi, just nicest guy you'll ever meet. You know.